Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us. Team Mosso at the1916company.com. It is in the description below. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any of our sites. Reach out to Team Mosso at the1916company.com for pricing. Today, we discuss a watch whose spacefaring credentials date back to the mid-1980s, when German scientist and astronaut Reinhard Furrer wore the Sinn 140 chronograph on the Space Lab mission to which he was assigned. He became a pioneer of Sinn's upper aerospace heritage, and this watch is directly descended from the one that he wore. You're looking at the Sinn 140 ST S Space Chronograph. So this one has been upgraded with Sinn's own movement and the unique hard black over tegament case treatment, but it still has the fundamental features that Reinhard would have recognized back in the day. It is a large watch at 44 millimeters in diameter, though it is not long from lug tip to lug tip, where it measures 45.5. In terms of thickness, it measures 15.2 with a 22 millimeter spacing between the lugs. It wears like a large tonneau on the wrist. That's the best way to describe it. So you can see how short it is from lug to lug. The lugs are well inboard the edge of my wrist. My wrist 16 centimeters in circumference. A lot of the presence of this watch on the wrist actually comes from the very substantial strap. So you can see that the lugs are well inboard on either side. I believe you could wear this watch well on a wrist of 15 centimeters circumference, so you could even go a little bit smaller than my wrist and still pull this off. The timepiece with a strap that is stacked leather atop leather, very robust. It's physically impressive and feels substantial and expensive. You can see there's an aviator-style contrasting stitch, and I do suppose going into orbit is aviation in its way. That is why they call it aerospace and not just aeronautics. You can see on the bottom, calfskin, very thick, lots of material, no crimping, no gouging, a brand new Sinn factory strap. We have a tegamented pin buckle to match the watch. Now, a little bit about tegament. Tegament is a carbon diffusion process that significantly hardens the steel down to several microns of depth. And on the uppermost level, you will get about 1,200 Vickers of hardness, which is approaching what you would expect on a ceramic coating. But Sinn then adds hard black, which is significantly harder even than the tegamented steel. The idea being most hard black coatings on conventional steel will crack because an impact occurs, pressure is applied, and the steel underneath is so soft, it's like the yolk of an egg. And there's nothing to prevent the eggshell, which is very hard, from collapsing and fracturing on the softer material below. So Sinn only puts the hard black today on its tegamented steel and titanium, so you don't have that soft substrate that will collapse and lead to the ultra-hard black material fracturing. So that's how that works. It's very scratch resistant. Even when you see something like this is some sort of material that touched the case and wore off on the case, like a crayon wears off on paper. That is not a mark on the material. It has no depth. It has no substance. It's something a watchmaker can remove with an abrasive. It's not a coating fracture of any kind or a failure of the hard black. Far from it. Now you can see the watch is basically a monoblock. Everything loads through the back here. So the bezel and the case are all one piece. And it is a watch with 100-meter water resistance. Even though it's aviation inspired and aviation used, you can still swim with it. No shortage of luminescence. You can see there is a bidirectional rotating internal bezel that can be used in conjunction with the chronograph, so you can time two events concurrently. There's also a copper sulfate capsule in the flank of the case. So you see where it says AR on the dial? Once upon a time, that meant two things. One, the case would be argon filled to displace any moisture from the case interior. And then you would have this little replaceable copper sulfate capsule screwed into the case flank that would absorb any further moisture that managed to intrude and bypass the seals. Today, they don't use argon anymore. They use a nitrogen fill, but the effect is the same, another inert gas. And this will go from basically new, which is what it looks like right now, where it's white or very borderline light blue. It'll go to an incredibly deep and intense blue when it's time to replace this little insert, and that can be done when the watch goes to Sinn in Frankfurt for servicing. And the watch is made in Frankfurt. It is a German watch, German-made, German-designed, which is why they spell automatic with a K. One other element that's German designed, we'll just make that a little bit more obvious here. You see where it says SZ01 underneath the minute hand? This is the minute hand. Sinn has re-engineered and rebuilt the Valjoux 7750 to work like the old Lemania 5100, which Sinn used prolifically back in the 90s and 2000s. So instead of having a semi-instantaneous jumping 30-minute sub-register, here we have a semi-instantaneous jumping radially displayed 60-minute register. So you get a 60-minute chronograph minute hand and you get a 12-hour chronograph minute hand. I like this radial display. It makes it easier to read individual minutes. I like having 60 minutes on my chrono register. Note the jump right here. Look how quick that is. Sinn has tuned this precisely so that the jump is instantaneous. Now we also have a couple of other features that you'll find on a 7750 base, including a hacking seconds function, as well as a quick set date, which you can use to rapidly cycle the date. Now the watch uses a cam-based system for cycling the chronograph functions, but that's no surprise. It's a 7750 architecture, but it is really crisp, like better than some lower 50% column wheels I've inspected. This is on par with the cam feel of something like an Omega Moonwatch. Really sharp. Now the other thing it has is an oscillating pinion clutch, which means that unlike a conventional lateral clutch, if you push and hold to start an oscillating pinion, the oscillating pinion has a lot more precision and a lot less play. So if you press and hold, you get almost the seamless engagement of a vertical clutch system. And the result there is that you've got a chronograph that is almost as precise starting up as a vertical clutch, but without the thickness that comes with a vertical clutch. 4 Hertz beat rate, and of course all of this protected down to 10 bar or 100 meters. You could see this was the automatic chronograph in space, part of Reinhard Furr's experimentation with his Sinn 140 chronograph was to prove that an automatic winding system would still work in zero gravity. And he did that because it's not necessarily gravity, but the inertia of the rotor that causes it to retain position and turn relative to the ball bearing. And everyone who's been through physics knows that weight and gravity tend to be terrestrial things, but mass is constant, and it is the mass of the rotor that will hold it in place as you move the watch around, allowing the unidirectional winding system to wind the 42-hour power reserve. So there is lots to love here. It also uses Sinn's D3 pusher sleeves for a very crisp action and a very tight fit between the actual shaft of the pusher and the sleeve that's built into the case to ensure a more hermetically sealed and hermetically tight relationship between the shaft of the pusher and the case flank itself. If you love this watch, reach out to Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing details of this aerospace chronograph made in Frankfurt, Germany.